Ever since the PS5 Pro reveal happened, everyone has been asking me just how well is it going to perform. Over the past year here on the channel, I've been talking about the leaks, and video after video, my expectations have not only been confirmed, but Sony's own video validated it outright. But over this past week, PC gamers and console fanboys from both sides have been trying to recreate a PS5 Pro equivalent PC. The main reason is the Pro's price tag puts it within spitting distance of a decent mid-ranged 1440p PC. However, this all came to a head when Destin with IGN interviewed Richard Ledbetter from Digital Foundry, and they blessed us with this headache.
Maybe I should just go to PC at this point, because this is quite expensive.
Yeah.
What do you imagine that would cost?
Probably a fair bit more. I mean, you need to have the GPU that you're going to need. I mean, if you consider a holistic view of all of the different components, the enhanced ray tracing, no AMD GPU has that at the moment. The machine learning block, no AMD GPU has that. It's almost like essentially an Nvidia style feature set, but made by AMD. And the closest equivalent GPU you'll be looking at would be the RTX 4070.
Sure enough, Sony fans took this clip as gospel, and given their lack of experience with PC building, they held tight to the fact that the RTX 4070 is the equivalent GPU. But is it though? Today, I want to walk you guys through the big three selling points for the PS5 Pro and debunk why the RTX 4070 is not the equivalent GPU. Let's begin. Let's start with some facts. Sony claims the PS5 Pro will perform up to 45% faster than the base PS5. They didn't say more than, they didn't say just 45, they said up to. In last week's video, we determined that this figure alone would translate into getting a 40 FPS game. It would bump it up to 60 FPS, but if you like to look at it from a resolution perspective, it would go from a 1080p base resolution to about 1440p. Let's look at Hardware Unboxed's RX 7700 XT for some context. Many of the GPUs that we're looking at here outclass the 1080p resolution, so let's just jump straight into 1440p. Let's take a look at the 6700 XT for example. If you watch some of my videos, I like to consider this card as kind of a Xbox Series X equivalent GPU. If we bump that card's raw performance by 45%, we land anywhere between the RTX 3080 and the 7700 XT.
Now, hold on, Turk. You just debunked yourself. The RTX 4070 is sitting right in that range.
Hold the phone there, viewer. The base PlayStation 5 is more equivalent to the RX 6700, not the XT version. Now, if you're watching this video, you likely trust Digital Foundry to this point, and they have also concluded that the 6700 is equivalent to the base PS5. Coming in around 16% slower than the faster XT variant, the base PS5 equivalent GPU would land about 62 FPS at 1440p on average, which, sure enough, if you do a bit more maths, it puts the equivalent performance to about 90 FPS, sitting right on top of the 7700 XT. So you might be asking yourself, what would it take to be equivalent to the RTX 4070? Again, let's throw some numbers into the maths, into this little formula, bing bang boom. The PS5 Pro would need a performance improvement of up to 65% in order to get to those massive claims. That is a lot of FPS. When you're talking about a PC, guys, this is what it takes to be considered a mid-range card in the year 2024. Since we're talking PS5 Pro, this same logic applies if we bump the resolution to 4K, where the base PS5 equivalent GPU would be around 35 FPS, and the Pro would be just around 50. Again, it is slower than the RTX 4070. Even if you don't believe these raw performance claims and you want to focus on the custom machine learning silicon that Nib was alluding to, we gotta ask ourselves, what does this feature really do? For the uninitiated, FSR is AMD's Fidelity FX Super Resolution. The goal is to take a lower resolution frame and enhance it to a larger resolution without the use of dedicated hardware. FSR is compatible with many vendors across generations of GPUs, making it a relatively robust open source solution for video games. PSSR, or PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution, is Sony's proprietary AI model that runs on dedicated machine learning hardware built into the PS5 Pro's processor. The main difference here is that with the dedicated piece of hardware, Sony can provide developers a more efficient and better performing mechanism to enhance a game's clarity with minimal impact on raw system performance. Now, we still need to learn more about how PSSR performs and how well it actually clears up an image, but the best analog we have today is Nvidia's Deep Learning Supersampling, or DLSS. Nvidia's tech requires its latest architectures to run and has been well refined over the past 6 years. So it makes sense that many supposed well-informed enthusiasts would make the jump, saying, well, these two custom AI-enhanced upscalers should be equivalent, right? Again, not so fast, guys. Tap the brakes. As always, the devil is in the details. In principle, if we take a low enough input resolution, a dedicated machine learning component should perform better than a more generic solution. However, as we increase that base internal resolution, both methods can resolve finer objects more cleanly. The theory is one thing, but can a non-accelerated upscaler be equivalent to a dedicated hardware unit? Guys, I hate to break it to you, but I answered this question nearly a year and a half ago. I thoroughly analyzed FSR and DLSS using real-time rendered graphics in-game with a specialized tool called VMAF to process over 100 gigs of footage into a digestible user score. I also made a frame-by-frame illustration of that score using those clips, and I showed you guys the difference between the two technologies. Now, I'll post a link in the description in case you're curious how it pans out, but here's the TLDR. At 1080p, DLSS can upscale from about 635p, and it does perform measurably better. But we're not upscaling from that low of a resolution here. We're talking about the PS5 Pro, so let's bump it up to 4K. Even if we use a 1080p internal resolution, of course up to 4K, FSR and DLSS perform effectively the same, at least in this action scene. But let's not just take my word for it, let's go back to some hardware and box data. They performed a subjective comparison of FSR versus DLSS in 26 different games. At 4K in quality mode, which renders at about 1440p, they found that in 65% of the games, DLSS only slightly improves clarity over FSR. In 27% of the games, DLSS was only moderately better, and in only 2 instances was DLSS significantly better. Even if we want to use performance mode, rendering at 1080p, DLSS and its custom machine learning technology are only moderately better 62% of the time, because 60% of the time it works every time. With that extra horsepower though, the pros shouldn't ever have to even hit this level of resolution, unless there's some really crazy graphics horsepower that's required. So yes, DLSS is better, but how much better is subjective at best and arguably marginally better at worst. To say that the inclusion of custom hardware instantly makes a device more equivalent is far from the truth, and it further proves that the RTX 4070 is not an equivalent comparison. Looking back at Sony's Big Three, we still have to talk about ray tracing equivalents. Even watching DF's reaction to these claims leaves me a bit perplexed.
There was the direct reference to can trace rays at 2 to 3 times the speed of PlayStation 5. Well, once again, I'm still wondering exactly what that is referencing, because it's got like just about double the compute units. And
60 versus 72, which would be double. But yeah, I think this is the point. I think I get what you're saying, which is that obviously there's going to be extra RT hardware per compute unit. So it's not
That's what I'm wondering.
It's not all architectural increases. It's also just sheer brute force for more compute, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm like wondering exactly what is it being attributed back to in the hardware.
Alex just nails it on the head here, which leaves me honestly dumbfounded by Richard's statements. Again, Hardware Unboxed has the data to back us up. At 1440p, the RX 7700 XT is 29% slower than the RTX 4070, and in all actuality, it performs similarly to an RTX 4060 Ti. Now, I'm no fortune teller in this regard. Still, given AMD's track record with ray tracing, the likelihood that RDNA 4 is going to be able to squeeze out an additional 30% more ray tracing performance is far from a slam dunk. Even Alex is not convinced, suggesting that these other improvements are minor iterative enhancements, not architectural leaps. Of course, we don't have all the answers or the details right now. It just seems really weird for Richard to make the RTX 4070 leap. It just seems off base from reality. So we've debunked the big three from Sony and how Digital Foundry has equated that to the 4070. Still, there's one more point that console enthusiasts probably have missed. The RTX 4070 has even more features built in that the Pro just simply doesn't have. Color me crazy though, but I think when you have extra things beyond a standard and what you're comparing to, that by definition doesn't make it equivalent. Regardless though, the RTX 4000 series of GPUs is genuinely a potent piece of kit for the modern PC gamer. The most significant benefit of Nvidia's cards is the inclusion of hardware-accelerated optical flow transformations. If that doesn't sound familiar, here's the marketing buzzword: frame generation. Now, you might say,
But Turk, we can use FSR-based frame generation. You've debunked yourself yet again.
on the contrary, skeptical viewer, I just debunked the entire equivalence argument. First, FSR 3's frame generation fundamentally differs from Nvidia's approach, and the results play into Nvidia's hand. Both aspects are not equivalent. Second, if you believe in requiring custom machine learning silicon as a requisite for equivalence, having this extra feature, it just further disqualifies it. And rounding out the feature set, we've got to remember Nvidia's Reflex, RTX Video Super Resolution, G-Sync support, and all of their other AI features, which sadly, many of AMD's alternatives, they're just left in the dust. At the end of the day, the PS5 Pro is truly an impressive piece of hardware. I actually agree with many console warriors when they say making an equivalent PC is going to be more expensive than the Pro. However, given the 4 points that I've debunked today, we can get pretty dang close, right at about $830, including a Windows key and a keyboard and mouse for new players. But guys, gaslighting yourself into thinking you have to pick up an RTX 4070 to build a PS5 Pro equivalent, it just seems silly. Now, if you're interested in learning more about this type of a PC, leave a comment down below and maybe consider sharing this video with your friends. I make these videos to help keep you guys informed, so I appreciate you guys sticking to the end of the video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.